What if I told you that the man who gave us Jack Nicholson, Ron Howard, and James Cameron had a hidden life full of secrets and family drama? Roger Corman, Hollywood's king of B-movies, was more than just a genius filmmaker, but at 98 years old, his passing has brought some shocking revelations.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
The fabled king of the bees, producer and director, influenced the careers of Jack Nicholson, Ron Howard, Peter Bogdanovich, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Jonathan Demme, and many others. Roger Corman, the fabled king of the bees, producer and director who turned out low-budget genre films with breakneck speed and provided career boosts to young, untested talents like Jack Nicholson, Ron Howard, Peter Bogdanovich, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Jonathan Demme, Gail Ann Hurd, and James Cameron, has died. He was 98. The filmmaker, who received an honorary Oscar in 2009 at the Governor's Awards, died Thursday at his home in Santa Monica, his family told The Hollywood Reporter.
Well, famed movie director Roger Corman has died at the age of 98. Mr. Corman notably directed a series of cult films, including The Little Shop of Horrors.
He was generous, open-hearted, and kind to all those who knew him, they said in a statement. When asked how he would like to be remembered, he said, "I was a filmmaker. Just that." Early life and first film.
98 years walking on this earth, and over 70 of those working in the industry that he and we all love. How do you talk about a man who had his hands in everything and gave us so much? He was an honorary Oscar winner and heavily involved in the Academy itself. He gave us New Concord and New World Pictures.
Roger Corman's path to Hollywood success was anything but straightforward. Imagine, he almost became an engineer before realizing his true passion lay elsewhere. It wasn't until a brief stint in the U.S. Navy and a job in a mailroom that Corman decided to take a gamble on filmmaking. But what came next would change his life forever. Corman was born in Detroit, Michigan to Anne, née Hai, and William Corman, an engineer of Russian Jewish descent. His younger brother, Gene, produced numerous films, sometimes in collaboration with Roger. Corman was raised in his mother's Catholic faith. In 1940, Corman's family moved from Detroit to Beverly Hills, California, near Hollywood, a move that inspired young Roger's love of motion pictures. Corman went to Beverly Hills High School and then to Stanford University to study industrial engineering. While at Stanford, Corman realized he did not want to be an engineer. He enlisted in the V-12 Navy College training program with 6 months of study to complete. After serving in the United States Navy from 1944 to 1946, he returned to Stanford to finish his degree, receiving a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering in 1947. While at Stanford University, Corman was initiated in the fraternity Sigma Alpha Epsilon. In 1948, he worked briefly at U.S. Electrical Motors on Slauson Avenue in Los Angeles. But his career in engineering lasted only 4 days. He began work on Monday and quit on Thursday, telling his boss, "I've made a terrible mistake." Soon after, he found work at 20th Century Fox as a messenger in the mailroom, earning $32.50 per week.
Film, or after the very first film, I was able to set myself up as a writer-producer.
5 guns west, 5 condemned men who traded a sentence to die for 1,000-to-1 chance to live.
Corman worked his way up to a story reader. The one property that he liked the most and provided ideas for was filmed as The Gunfighter with Gregory Peck. When Corman received no credit at all, he left Fox and decided he would work in film by himself. Under the GI Bill, Corman studied English literature at the University of Oxford and lived in Paris for a time. Corman then returned to Los Angeles and tried to re-establish himself in the film industry. He took various jobs, including television stagehand at KLAC-TV and messenger at Fox. He worked as an assistant to agent Dick Hyland, a literary agent. Corman wrote a script in his spare time and sold it to William F. Brody at Allied Artists for $2,000, equivalent to $22,691 in 2023. Dick thought it was funny and let me pay myself a commission, said Corman. Originally called House in the Sea, it was retitled Highway Dragnet in 1954 and starred Richard Conte and Joan Bennett. Corman also worked as an associate producer on the film for nothing, just for the experience. King of the B movies.
My worry was to get started.
And roll sound, please.
Roger Corman is still making movies his way.
Get this on schedule today, then theoretically we move along.
And action.
Attack of the 50-foot cheerleader is just the latest in the 85-year-old filmmaker's half-century career.
Corman didn't just make movies, he defined an entire genre. Dubbed the King of the B movies, his name became synonymous with fast, cheap, and wildly entertaining films. But how did he build an empire on a shoestring budget? His ability to turn nothing into something extraordinary is the stuff of Hollywood legend. Corman used his script fee and personal contacts to raise $12,000, equivalent to $136,149 in 2023, to produce his first feature, a science fiction film, Monster from the Ocean Floor, 1954. It was produced by Corman's own company Palo Alto and released by Robert L. Lippert. Monster from the Ocean Floor in 1954 was made in 6 days. It was the first of his movies to follow what was to become his standard method of operation. Inexpensive productions shot in the minimum amount of time, often in less than 1 week. That same year, he also produced The Fast and the Furious for American Releasing Corporation, which later became American International Pictures, AIP, for which Corman produced and directed many of his most noted films.
Picture, won't you? And I said, absolutely. The Fast and the Furious was the second picture I produced. It was a sports car racing picture called The Fast and the Furious.
Decades later, producer Neil H. Moritz at Universal Pictures licensed the title for the 2001 film The Fast and the Furious, which eventually spawned a successful franchise. Moritz had difficulty choosing between proposed titles for Racer X, Redline, Race Wars, and Street Wars, and was inspired by a documentary on American International Pictures that included Corman's film. Moritz was able to trade the use of some stock footage to Corman for use of the title. Corman sold the movie to a new independent company, the American Releasing Company ARC, run by James H. Nicholson and Samuel Z. Arkoff. Although Corman had a number of offers for the film from Republic and Columbia, he elected to go with ARC because they undertook to advance money to enable him to make 2 more movies. In 1955, he directed his first feature film, 5 Guns West, a romantic western. A western made in color for around $60,000 with Malone and John Lund. The script was written by Robert Wright Campbell, who worked with Corman on several more occasions. The titles of many of Corman's films of the 1950s, The Beast with a Million Eyes, It Conquered the World, Attack of the Crab Monsters, Teenage Caveman, Night of the Blood Beast, The Brain Eaters, The Crybaby Killer, the film that marked Nicholson's screen debut, and A Bucket of Blood, indicate why he earned the nickname King of the Drive-In or King of the B movies. Corman was to make The Devil on Horseback by Charles B. Griffith about the Brownsville raid, but it was too expensive. The Woolner brothers, Louisiana drive-in owners, financed Corman's Swamp Woman 1956, a Girls on the Lam saga. He returned to ARC for 2 westerns, The Oklahoma Woman 1956 and Gunslinger 1956 with Ireland. Gunslinger was co-written by Griffith, who became a crucial collaborator with Corman over the next 5 years. He bought a script from Curtis Harrington, The Girl from Beneath the Sea. Harrington made it for Corman years later as Night Tide 1961. B films.
Sometimes I even scare myself.
You might think B movies are just low-budget knockoffs, but Roger Corman proved that these films could be something more. While Hollywood chased the big-budget blockbusters, Corman was creating a whole new subculture of cinema. His films didn't need extravagant sets or massive stars. They thrived on grit, creativity, and pushing boundaries. So, why did these movies gain such a cult following? B films, or B movies, are cheaply produced, formulaic films initially intended to serve as the second feature on a double bill. During the 30s and 40s, a period often called the Golden Age of Hollywood, B films were usually paired with bigger budget, more prestigious A pictures. But 2B films were sometimes used for midweek or Saturday matinee showings. The characteristics of B films included low budgets, tight shooting schedules, formulaic scripts, relatively short running times, and minimal production design. B films existed because of the exhibition practices of the Golden Age. Showing a program consisting of 2 full-length feature films began as a way to entice viewers into movie theaters during the Great Depression, when audience levels began to drop. By 1935, 85% of American motion picture theaters were programming double features. A typical bill at this time lasted 3 hours or more and included 2 features, cartoons, a newsreel, and previews of forthcoming films. The major studios, which owned their own theater chains during the Golden Age, were compelled to meet the demand for double bills. They soon found the most profitable combination to be the pairing of an A film with a low-budget, quickly produced genre film. A films pulled in the audience and were rented to theaters for a percentage of the box office receipts. B pictures were rented at a fixed rate, making the profits easy to calculate but small. The B film further declined after 1948 when the U.S. Supreme Court issued the Paramount Decrees, which prohibited restrictive booking practices and forced the major studios to sell their theaters. This restructuring, along with competition from television and changes in tastes, resulted in the demise of double bills. Low-budget film production and exhibition did not cease, however. Studios such as American International Pictures emerged during the 1950s to offer cheaply produced exploitation movies which were targeted to specific audiences or low-rent exhibitors. These films, which were not necessarily exhibited with an A picture, were also dubbed B films. It was at this juncture that the term B movie became equated with shoddy production values and poor quality filmmaking. Major studios such as Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Inc., MGM, and RKO Radio Pictures Inc. had separate operations called B units to produce their B films. The B designation did not originally mean poor quality. Films later considered influential, including producer Val Lewton's horror series at RKO, like Cat People in 1942, I Walked with a Zombie in 1943, and film noir classics such as director Robert Siodmak's Crisscross in 1949 were made as B films. As the cost of film production rose during the 40s, the major studios began to abandon their B units. Several small studios, including Republic and Monogram, stepped in to fulfill the need for low-budget movies. These studios were collectively known as Poverty Row, Gower Gulch, or the B Hive. The Film Group. Corman wasn't satisfied with just making films. He wanted control. In 1959, he founded the Film Group with his brother Gene, and their goal was to distribute their own low-budget films. But the real question is, how did this small venture lead to some of the most iconic films in drive-in history? The answer might surprise you.
I was fortunate enough to begin my career at a time when the independent field was growing, so it was partially being in the right place at the right time. And the other thing I would say is I really worked. I worked very, very hard. People think of directing a film as a glamorous thing, and to a certain extent it is, but it is also.
In January 1959, Corman announced he would be moving into distribution. In 1959, Corman founded the Film Group with his brother Gene, a company producing or releasing low-budget black and white films as double features for drive-ins and auction houses. In February 1959, Film Group announced that they would release 10 films. Their first movies were High School Big Shot, 1959, and T-Bird Gang, 1959, produced by Stanley Bickman. For AIP, Corman and Griffith made a black comedy, A Bucket of Blood. Corman announced he would follow it with a similar comedy, The Bloodshot Private Eye. It does not seem to have been made. Instead, Griffith reused the same script structure, and Corman employed many of the same cast in The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960. This film was reputedly shot in 2 days and 1 night. For Film Group, Corman directed The Wasp Woman, 1959, starring Cabot from a script by Gordon. His brother and he made 2 films back-to-back in South Dakota, Ski Troop Attack, a war movie written by Griffith and directed by Corman, and Beast from Haunted Cave, the first film directed by Monty Hellman. Corman went to Puerto Rico and produced another 2 films back-to-back, Battle of Blood Island, directed by Joel Rapp, and The Last Woman on Earth, directed by Corman from a script by Robert Towne. Filming on these 2 films went so quickly, and incentivized by the tax breaks on offer for filming in Puerto Rico, Corman commissioned Griffith to write a third, which was shot at the same time, Creature from the Haunted Sea. Corman was going to make Part-Time Mother from a script by Griffith, but it also appears to have never been made. The Little Shop of Horrors.
That looks great.
What if I told you one of Corman's most beloved cult classics was made in just 2 days and 1 night? That's right. The Little Shop of Horrors was shot on a leftover set with a tiny budget, and yet it became a defining moment in Corman's career. But how did a rushed project turn into an enduring favorite?
Oh, Jesus! I'm in trouble now, huh? Oh, wait till I turn this gas off.
In 1960, Corman produced and directed the cult classic The Little Shop of Horrors, which was shot in 2 days and 1 night on a leftover set, with a memorable cameo by Nicholson. At AIP, he sought out young and thus inexpensive filmmakers, many of whom went on to have stellar careers. Coppola and Bogdanovich each had early credits re-editing Soviet sci-fi films, Battle Beyond the Sun from 1959 and Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women from 1968, respectively, for Corman. The post-apocalypse yarn Last Woman on Earth from 1960 was written by Robert Towne, who would later become renowned as the writer of the neo-noir film Chinatown from 1974. Corman also drafted Towne as an actor, but Towne disguised both contributions under the pseudonym Edward Wayne. Edgar Allan Poe Films.
The main challenge with The Fall of the House of Usher and the other Poe stories was the fact that they were very short, sometimes, as with The Pit and the Pendulum, just 2 or 3 pages. And
Corman took a daring step when he decided to adapt the works of Edgar Allan Poe into feature films. He transformed Gothic literature into haunting cinematic experiences. But what was it about these stories that fascinated Corman, and how did they push the boundaries of horror filmmaking in the 60s? The answer lies in his creative vision. During the 60s, Corman directed 8 lavish Gothic horror films based on the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, including House of Usher, 1960, The Pit and the Pendulum, 1961, The Raven, 1963, The Haunted Palace, 1963, and The Mask of the Red Death, 1964. All but one of the Poe films starred Vincent Price, and these films featured such other established actors as Basil Rathbone, Boris Karloff, Ray Milland, and Peter Lorre. Other cult classic films.
The 70s and 80s, where movies pushed the envelope and tested your limits. One man gave us some of the most wild and outrageous films ever. Producer and director Roger Corman.
It's time for action.
Roger Corman's Cult Classics. Some never before.
Roger Corman didn't just stick to horror. He branched out into biker films, race relations dramas, and even counterculture movies. From The Wild Angels to The Intruder, Corman's fearless approach to tackling edgy subjects made him a pioneer. So, what was the common thread that made all these films so memorable? The answer lies in his willingness to defy expectations. Not all Corman's work of the period was confined to the horror genre, however. The Intruder from 1962 was a serious parable about race relations, with William Shatner as a rabble-rousing racist in the South. The Wild Angels from 1966 was a sordid biker film that was based on the exploits of the Hells Angels and starred Peter Fonda, Bruce Dern, and Nancy Sinatra. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre from 1967 was a relatively faithful account of the notorious 1929 slaughter, starring Jason Robards as Al Capone. The Trip, 1967, written by Nicholson, featured Fonda as a director of TV commercials who experiences surreal visions after a first experience with LSD, while Bloody Mama from 1970 was a violent portrayal of the Ma Barker story, starring Shelley Winters with Robert De Niro as one of her twisted sons. New World Pictures. Corman's vision extended far beyond directing. In the 70s, he formed New World Pictures, an independent company that gave young filmmakers a platform to shine. He was now not just a filmmaker, but a mentor and a tastemaker. But what was it about New World that led to its extraordinary success, and how did it become the breeding ground for future Hollywood titans? In 1970, Corman left AIP and formed New World Pictures, an independent company that produced and distributed the work of such young artists as John Sayles, Martin Scorsese, Joe Dante, Jonathan Demme, and James Cameron. Its first film, The Student Nurses from 1970, was shot in 3 weeks for $150,000 and grossed more than $1 million. Other New World releases included horror, blaxploitation, and women in prison films. The profits from these low-budget features allowed Corman to act as the American distributor for a number of prestigious foreign films, including Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers, Federico Fellini's Amarcord, and Volker Schlondorff's The Tin Drum. Corman sold New World Pictures in 1983 and founded Concord New Horizons, a company devoted strictly to movie production. Other projects. Corman's career didn't slow down even as he reached the later stages of his life. He continued to produce, direct, and even act in films, keeping his hand firmly in the industry he helped build. But what made Corman's passion for filmmaking so relentless? His ability to adapt with the times and stay ahead of the curve is also a story worth telling. In a career reaching from the 50s to the 2010s, Corman produced or directed hundreds of films. Despite their blatantly low production values, the majority of Corman's films are surprisingly entertaining and literate, and they are often characterized by a campy, self-deprecating humor. His influence on contemporary American cinema was enormous, in large part because of his discovery and promotion of young actors and directors. Though Corman officially retired from directing in 1971, he made a comeback with the well-received Frankenstein Unbound from 1990. An occasional actor, Corman typically appeared in the films of those whose careers he had helped. He had minor roles in Coppola's The Godfather Part 2 and in such Demme films as Philadelphia, The Manchurian Candidate, and Rachel Getting Married. Other notable films included Apollo 13. Corman co-wrote with Jim Jerome an autobiography, the aptly titled How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime in 1971. In 2009, he was given an honorary Academy Award for Lifetime Achievement. 2 years later, he was the subject of the documentary Corman's World: Exploits of a Hollywood Rebel. Personal life and death.
I was an engineering major, but I was writing for the Stanford Daily, and I became the film critic of the Daily, and then I started to analyze films more deeply, and the more I looked at films, the more I thought about them, the more I thought I wanted to make motion pictures.
Behind the camera, Corman's life was filled with its own share of drama. His personal relationships were often complicated, and his family life was not without its struggles. When Corman passed away at 98, his wife Julie revealed some of the personal challenges they faced. What were these untold stories, and how did they shape the man behind the films? Corman was married to Julie Halloran from 1970 until his death. They had 4 children. Corman died at his home in Santa Monica, California on May 9, 2024, at the age of 98. When Corman's death was announced by his family on Corman's official Instagram account, his sons were not mentioned in the announcement. He is survived by his wife Julie and his daughters Catherine and Mary. A devoted and selfless father, he was deeply loved by his daughters. Legal issues. Roger Corman's legacy wasn't just confined to filmmaking. He faced some intense legal battles late in life. His own children sued him over the family business and control of the family trust. These internal struggles left scars, but how did they impact his final years? The courtroom drama behind the Corman family is one few people know about. In 2009, Corman was sued by his children, who claimed they had been unfairly fired from the family production business after raising questions about the family trust. In a complaint filed in Los Angeles Superior Court, the children say they were terminated after requesting an accounting of trust assets. In response to the requests, the kids alleged that Roger's wife Julie declared that the assets of the family trust were hers and made a concealed attempt to move the trusts to other states and even offshore so as to gain greater control. One of Roger's sons said he spoke out about transactions he perceived as potentially being unlawful and having serious tax ramifications. Julie allegedly threatened to leave Roger if he ever discussed finances with his children without her present. On October 13, the children say they received emails informing them they would no longer be working at Corman's New Horizons Picture Corp, which has lately taken steps to become the New Education Foundation. In March 2015, Corman and his wife filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court saying they lost up to $60 million when their money was mismanaged by an investment fund. They later said the damages ran as high as $170 million. In 2018, Corman and his wife were sued by their sons over the sale of Corman's film library. In March, Corman sold the rights to the 270 films in his New Horizon picture catalog in a joint deal with Shout Factory and China's Ace Film HK. 2 weeks later, Corman's 2 sons filed a lawsuit challenging the sale, claiming their father and his wife, Julie Corman, didn't have the right to sell the catalog because some of its titles belonged to the Pacific Trust, which Corman established to benefit his 4 children. In their lawsuit, lawyers for Corman's sons portrayed their aging father as selling the library only after crumbling under intense verbal abuse from his wife. However, over the course of an hour-long conversation at New York's Bowery Hotel, the 6-decade industry veteran proved sharp and incredibly engaging as he shared a range of insights on changes to the business, the craft of filmmaking, the mastery of Jonathan Demme, his recently deceased mentee, and the evolution of his own 60-film directorial career. This case was reportedly settled in February 2020. It's settled and over, said Corman at the time. Awards, recognition, and legacy.
It's coming. Can't you get him to be quiet until it comes?
I hadn't really worked at all before. When I got a lead in the movie, I thought, oh, this is it.
Oh, about the 3rd or 4th day of The Wild Angels, I said, how many of these things have you done? He said, this is my 100th.
Corman might have been the king of low-budget films, but his influence was recognized in high places. From honorary Oscars to Lifetime Achievement Awards, Corman's legacy was cemented in Hollywood history. But what made him so deserving of these accolades? And how did his work influence the next generation of filmmakers? In 1964, Corman was the youngest producer/director to be given a retrospective at the Cinémathèque Française, as well as retrospectives at the British Film Institute and the Museum of Modern Art. Corman won the Lifetime Achievement Award at Stockholm International Film Festival in 1990. Corman was the subject of the 1978 documentary Roger Corman, Hollywood's Wild Angel, produced and directed by Christian Blackwood. Portions of the film reappeared in the 2011 Corman's World. He won the first Producer's Award ever given by the Cannes Film Festival in 1998. Corman received the David O. Selznick Award from the Producers Guild of America in 2006. That same year, his film Fall of the House of Usher was among the 25 movies selected for the National Film Registry, a compilation of significant films being preserved by the Library of Congress. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences awarded Corman with an Academy Honorary Award at the inaugural Governor's Awards on November 14, 2009. In 2010, writer and actor Mark Gatiss interviewed Corman for his BBC documentary series A History of Horror, of which the second half of the second episode focuses on Corman. In 2010, Corman was inducted into the Beverly Hills High School of Fame. Corman was honored with the Filmmaker on the Edge Award at the Provincetown International Film Festival in 2012. He received the Extraordinary Contribution to Film Award at the Austin Film Festival in 2018. Corman was a member of numerous organizations such as the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the Producers Guild of America, as well as New World Pictures, New Concord, and American International Pictures. Film elements and prints for many movies directed, produced, and/or distributed by Corman are held at the Academy Film Archive as part of the New Horizons collection. The Academy Film Archive restored Corman's film The Mask of the Red Death in 2019. The Corman Film School.
I think that to succeed in this world, you have to take chances. But I believe the finest films being done today are done by the original, innovative filmmakers who have the courage to take a chance and to gamble.
If you've ever heard a filmmaker say they learned more working with Corman than in any film school, you'll understand why people call it the Corman Film School. Directors like James Cameron and Francis Ford Coppola cut their teeth under his guidance. So, what exactly did Corman teach them, and how did this untraditional education shape some of the most important films of the last century? A number of noted filmmakers, including directors, producers, writers, and cinematographers, have worked with Corman, usually early in their careers, including Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, Polly Platt, Peter Bogdanovich, Declan O'Brien, Armando Linus Acosta, Paul Bartel, Jonathan Demme, Donald G. Jackson, Gail Ann Hurd, Carl Colpert, Joe Dante, James Cameron, John Sayles, Monty Hellman, Carl Franklin, George Armitage, Jonathan Kaplan, George Hickenlooper, Curtis Hanson, Jack Hill, Robert Towne, Menahem Golan, James Horner, and Timur Bekmambetov. Many have said that Corman's influence taught them some of the ins and outs of filmmaking. In the extras for the DVD of The Terminator, director James Cameron asserts, "I trained at the Roger Corman Film School." The British director Nicholas Roeg served as the cinematographer on The Mask of the Red Death. Cameron, Coppola, Demme, Hanson, Howard, and Scorsese have all gone on to win Academy Awards. Howard was reportedly told by Corman, "If you do a good job on this film, you'll never have to work for me again." Legacy.
Roger Corman, a cinematic legacy remembered through 10 must-see films. Roger Corman, the legendary film director and producer, has left an indelible mark on the world of cinema. With a career spanning over 6 decades, Corman's influence can be felt in countless genres, from horror and science fiction to comedy and drama.
Roger Corman's legacy isn't just the hundreds of films he created, it's the lasting impact he had on Hollywood. His willingness to take risks, discover new talent, and push the boundaries of what cinema could be left a mark that will never fade. But what's the lasting impression of Corman's work today, and how will future generations remember him? The answer is as compelling as the man himself. Actors who obtained their career breaks working for Corman include Jack Nicholson, Peter Fonda, Bruce Dern, Charles Bronson, Todd Field, Michael McDonald, Dennis Hopper, Tommy Lee Jones, Talia Shire, Sandra Bullock, Robert De Niro, and David Carradine, who received one of his first starring film roles in the Corman-produced Boxcar Bertha from 1972 and went on to star in Death Race 2000 along with Sylvester Stallone. Many of Corman's protégés have paid their mentor homage by awarding him film cameos such as in The Godfather Part 2, The Silence of the Lambs, Apollo 13, and, as recently as the Dem film, Rachel Getting Married from 2008. Corman, perhaps, is best known for such horror fare as The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960 and his series of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations starring Vincent Price, but he became celebrated for drugs and biker sagas like The Wild Angels from 1966, which was invited to the Venice Film Festival as the premiere presentation. He also achieved notoriety for producing The Trip from 1967, which starred Peter Fonda as a man on an LSD-inspired odyssey. Its controversy delighted Corman, who was one of the first producers to recognize the power of negative publicity. His blend of sex, nudity, violence, and social themes was taken seriously in many quarters, especially in Europe and among film school professors, and in 1964, he was the first American producer-director to be honored at the Cinémathèque Française with a retrospective of his movies. Others considered his work so embarrassingly awful that it deserved lasting notoriety. Take Blood Mama from 1970, for instance. Sure, it was a gangster saga about Ma Barker and her thug sons, but the cast included Shelley Winters, Robert De Niro, and Bruce Dern. There are two divergent schools of thought on Corman's career. One, that he recognized and nurtured talent, or two, that he exploited youthful talent and never used it to go beyond the rudiments of pushing out quinky products. Nicholson, then 21, made his big screen debut in Corman's The Crybaby Killer from 1958. Corman hired a young Scorsese to direct Boxcar Bertha in 1972 and Dem to write Caged Heat in 1974. He made new college graduate Hurd his production assistant and later his marketing chief, and handed Camera the job of designing props for Battle Beyond the Stars in 1980. The giant of independent filmmaking also gave Howard a chance to direct his first feature, Grand Theft Auto, from 1977. When the former child actor complained about the producer's refusal to pay more for extras, Corman famously said, "Ron, if you do a good job for me on this picture, you'll never have to work for me again." Corman had certain aesthetic rules and qualitative guidelines, which he delivered with his characteristic insouciance. In science fiction films, the monster should always be bigger than the leading lady. He pioneered such cinematic staples as the girl's shower scene, usually the second scene in a Corman teen film. He insisted his directors practice proper professionalism, namely, always have the girls lather up their arms and stomachs so as not to obscure the integrity of the breast shots. In his Oscar acceptance speech, Corman applauded those in the world who take risks. "Many of my friends and compatriots and people who have started with me are here tonight, and they've all succeeded," he said. "Some of them succeeded to an extraordinary degree, and I believe they've succeeded because they had the courage to take chances, to gamble. But they gambled because they knew the odds were with them. They knew they had the ability to create what they wanted to make." Thanks for watching. If you loved uncovering the truth behind Hollywood's biggest legends, be sure to check out our other videos. You won't want to miss the next shocking revelation. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.